The argument you will get about having social housing in Umhlanga is that it's going to devalue.
Yes.
If we were to accept that to be a fact, then let's explain why Sandton is the highest valued square mile in Africa, but it's across the bridge from Alex. The history of land ownership in this country is well documented. How the Group Areas Act, the Native Lands Act were passed and what were the intentions. But between 1913 and 1984, 5 laws were passed. And all of them were intended to make sure that black people in general do not own properties.
Okay.
That was abolished in 1991 with an act, abolishment of Land Rights Act, that allowed black people to own properties.
Okay.
That history is important because if you don't know it, which is I think the point that was missed at the time, you are not going to understand then how. Then come 1996, 1994, democracy, 1996, the constitution comes. And that constitution is the only one in the world that has transformationalized or that has advancing transformation of property rights.
Okay.
And the basis for that is because of what happened between
1913
and 1984. The last act was passed in 1984.
And that's recent.
Yeah, and pretty much Africans, Indians and coloreds were not allowed to own properties on the beachfront.
Yes.
Now let's then go to the profile of the leases on the beachfront. 70% of those leases were signed between 1950 and 1980. Now what was the law in those years?
Yeah, it was exclusive.
It was exclusive. Now, you then have to come to what the Constitution says. And you start at Section 992, that talks about government having to have policies that advance people that were historically disadvantaged. Your Employment Equity Act comes from there. Your BBB Act comes from there.
But we hate BE.
Which is, I'll explain why, because I think it goes to how we consume information generally.
Yes.
That we conclude things we don't understand at times in misinformation without necessarily understanding what they actually mean. You then come to Section 25 of the Constitution. It's the longest, by the way, in terms of the...
I didn't know it's the longest.
Now, 25, 1, 2, and 3 talks about expropriation.
Yes.
Then 4, then 5. 5 then says the state must take legislative and other measures to ensure that citizens gain access to land on an equitable basis. It says must. Meaning,
Not should.
Not should. So it's not discretionary. It's not discretionary. It says must.
happen.
It's an obligation.
Okay.
That obligation. And then you have 25.6 that then talks about the state again taking measures to ensure that people who were given inferior rights are entitled to have those rights upgraded into that. Now, it goes back to the 5 acts. Black people were given PTOs that don't give them any legal right
To own land.
to own land.
And it still happens today in the traditional areas,
Yes.
but we're not there.
But if we understood what those things were, I don't think we'll be perpetuating them even in post-traumatic South Africa, post-apartheid, in the democratic society, because those are contravention of a constitutional obligation. And then you have 7 that talks about restitution.
Yes.
And then 8 says nothing in this thing must impede the state in its effort to do that. Then you then go to the last part, Section 217, that talks about.
So
this.
all these sections are here. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So
I'm jealous.
So Section 217 then talks about procurement.
Yes.
About the state having to have procurement, and it must be fair, equitable, transparent. and competitive.
Yes.
Now, the similarities in words is that the word equitable is in 25.5 and the word equitable is in 217. Now, your procurement act that was passed in 2000 is meant to implement what section 217. Then what? So in a nutshell, if you were to then renew those leases that were entered into between 1950 and 1980, you are contravening section 25.5 because there is nothing equitable about it because of the history
under which they
were
they
signed.
were granted.
Yeah. Now you are then perpetuating one, the exclusion that was committed during apartheid. If you renew, automatically. Our grandfathers, even if they have the financial capacity to develop and run those things,
they
could have
would
not gotten the
have.
opportunity to do so.
And it was legalized that they can't.
Exactly. Now, we must also exclude you now if we automatically renew. And the Constitution is not advancing that position. Hence, it talks about fairness, transparency, and equitability.
Before we move on, I need to summarize this for someone listening at home because I've just been schooled. So, in South Africa, black people were not allowed to own property. The Constitution of South Africa now allows for black people to own property. Not allows, actually says it should be promoted.
For all citizens, because
For all
it says...
citizens, not just black people.
Yeah.
Cool. But the hotels along the beachfront were leased to people under the laws that excluded everyone else except for one race.
Yeah.
So therefore, if those lease agreements were renewed, it would have contravened. What's the word? Yeah, it would have been against the Constitution in essence, because you are renewing a lease that was signed under the apartheid law.
Let's put it correctly.
Okay.
We have section 217
Yes.
that talks about competitiveness,
Yes.
transparency,
Yes.
equitability. You then have MFMA within local government, section 14.5 specifically.
MFA being Municipal
Finance Management Act.
Okay, yes.
That says when you dispose council properties,
Yes.
you must do it in a fair, equitable, transparent, and competitive process.
Okay.
Now, that specific section, I said 25.5 said through legislation and other means. It's a legislation, that section 25.5, that says the state must take steps to ensure that people gain access to land on an equitable basis. That's the legislation that section 25.5 then talks about. Now, if you then renew, I'm not going to talk about the race issue, but
Yes.
if you then renew automatically, you are contravening two provisions on, specifically one on 14.5, competitiveness. It's written. So if you read 14.5, they took section 217 of the Constitution, 217.1, and copied it and included it on the Municipal Finance Management Act and said when you dispose properties,
Make sure.
make sure. Now, 25.5 has the word equitable, 217 has the word equitable, 14.5 has the word equitable. What is meant by that equitability?
What is meant by that?
Equitability is, I think you and I are the same height. He may be taller than us. Now, if we have to then watch and look ourselves at that mirror, you and I will have to be given steps that would make us
So that you can
level with him so that we are the same height.
So it's not so much about even the color,
It's not so much about even the color.
the race.
Or the race. There has to be some level of equality, not equality, but the
Equity.
some level of equity,
Yes.
where all races are represented
Yes.
without the other being dominant over the other.
And legally so.
And
so
legally
if
so.
you issue, for an example, if you say, okay, people bid
Yeah.
for leasing these properties and only certain people respond, you can't then change that. But you've now done it legally, you've done it in a way that is in line with the Constitution and with
MFMA.
MFMA. Therefore, you can't control who then bids in that instance. But in terms of how it was advertised, everyone has access to it.
Everyone has to have an equal opportunity, and it has to be transparent.
Because my next question was going to be, I'm Rose, I'm just Rose, and can I, as Rose, acquire municipal property, or is it only for established developers? Certain people can just ordinary citizens, and what would be the process for that? And not confining it to, let's say, the beachfront.
Yeah, let's deal with the beachfront issue, because it was not only the hotel. There was also a theme park that we were criticized.
A what? Oh, the
theme
park.
Funland,
yes.
That we were criticized for not renewing the lease.
Now, why did you run it?
That started in 1950.
The lease.
Yeah, it was there for 75 years. If leases have an option to renew, you are bound by that lease. None of them have that option to renew.
The option to renew. So
now,
the state knew what it was doing.
The state knew what it was doing. So when they then run their course, you then have to, we are in the 2000s. What is the law in the 2000s? You have to follow that law in the 2000s. Now, as a result, the beachfront did not have representation of all the demographic groups.
Does it now?
It does. It is, except for one, but it does. Because there are others that were at zero. I'll make an example. Indians were at zero until 2023.
Indians, you say? They didn't
No, Africans.
Africans, okay.
Indians were there as well.
Okay.
But at a very thin level. We've managed to get it to a level where the only demographic profiles we do not have on the beachfront is colors.
Okay. Why is that?
I'll come to when I answer your question.
Okay.
Because I'm just giving you so that I
follow the structure.
I follow the structure. Now, what we did in 2019 was to introduce a policy linked toward the obligation on 25.5 requires equitable access. And the first thing we did was to say we will not sell properties as a rule.
That was bold. And cool.
Yes, because one of the barriers of entry in terms of property is price.
A price?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a reason why we don't buy our properties cash.
Yes.
And we bond them because it's affordable to pay it over a period. We then use treasury definitions that they define a property that is above 10 million, 10.1 million and above as a high value, and 10 million it's low value. Then say we will enter into leases for 30 years for properties that are 10 million and below.
30 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 10.1 and above would be 45. The hotels have an exception at 50.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is for you to be able to have meaningful participation, you need to deal with the barriers of entry.
Chalet.
Yeah.
Mad.
And that was one of the things we had to dismantle, that barrier of entry related to price, because you are then able to have a broader access.
Yes.
So even you, because you don't want 10 million upfront, you are able to participate because you don't want 10 million upfront. If we were selling, we would want 10 million upfront. But two, the District Registries Act, you are a land surveyor, you would know it, was done in 1937. Section 102 of it defines a lease longer than 10 years as immovable property.
Yes.
So that lease, because it's over 10 years, it's registered.
Yes.
It confers the same rights that somebody as a title deed has.
Except after the set period it expires.
Yes.
And you can just choose not to renew it like...
Yes, but understand that what we are trying to do is to create a broader platform for access.
Okay.
Not to make people rich. A broader access. That's what the Constitution requires. That create access on an equitable basis. How you achieve that equity is if you then have a lot of people that are eligible to participate. If you put a property price up front, the number shrinks.
Oh, so if you were looking at someone who's able to run the properties, because you have to look at the capacity as well, can this person do this.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily look at, do I have 10 million? You would look at, can I pay the lease amount monthly? Or do you look at the business case of what I'm proposing to do with the property that I want to acquire?
Again, then there's the issue of strategy.
Okay.
And linked to access again. For your low value properties, and low value as going forward, I'll refer to them as low value, but
yes, because you've defined what low value
yes,
is. Anything less than 10 million is
yes,
low value.
There we don't want development experience.
Okay.
Because even how we value, we do not value bulk. We value size. So
what does that mean?
A size is, this table is 1,000 square meters.
Yes.
That's what we value. You could build 10 stories. That's 10,000 square meters. We don't value the bulk. We value the size.
Oh, of the land.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll come to that in terms of what that means. Now, we don't then want development experience on
low value
properties. But we want your concepts, which must be aligned to the zoning of the property. Now your zoning,
the current zoning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or something, if you can read and interpret municipal special development frameworks, whatever the MSDF envisaged, either that of the two. Now, the reason why we also don't value bulk is you will have a site that is zone general or commercial, that allows for retail, that allows for a block of flats, that allows for a hotel. We don't know what proposal we're going to get.
Yes.
So you as a bidder would price the bulk. He may want to develop 5,000 square meters, he'll price his 5,000 square meters. You may want to develop 10,000 square meters, you will price to 10,000 square meters.
Yeah.
So we want your concept aligned to the zoning, we want your site framework plan, we want profiles of your development team. We want...
Development team, did you hear that?
Yeah. We want your, we call it economic transformation and empowerment.
Okay.
Subcontracting, how many jobs you're going to create, where you're going to source your material. But what is mandatory is, it's one thing to give you land, the secondary issue is where you're going to get funding.
Yes.
You have regulations that were introduced in 2008 to support MFMA, specifically Section 14, that then deals with the processes. That's where the high value and low value are defined. Regulation 414 requires us to ensure that whoever we give land to has the capacity to safeguard that asset. Now we then interpret that to mean that if we then giving you land for development, you must have the capacity to raise the money and develop the land. So as a result, we then want, as a mandatory requirement, your access to financing. It could be your money, it could be an expression of interest from a bank that says, we will fund this development. So that's how we then look at capacity. On high value, we then want development experience. Because if we are valuing size and the property is with 10, 15 million, by implication it's a very big piece of land.
Yes.
It is going to be require a lot of capital investment to be developed. Then we will then want development experience. And the reason why we also want development experience is, even from your funding point of view, your track record matters to even a funding institution that is going to fund you. You are not going to go from zero to borrow 100 million.
Yes, yeah. Well, you might try, but you
won't
get.
Because you don't have the security that they would want. I mean,
yes,
they would generally, those loans are funded 60, 40, 70, 30. So if your development cost is 100 million, you must have at least 30 million of your own money that you are going to put in the development. So if you then have zero, I don't know how you move from that to...
Because you're killing my dreams here. I have aspirations.
Yeah, so you are not going to have the security required by the bank to raise that kind of money.
Yeah. But it's important to like drill the point home about the low value properties, that what you need is the things that you listed. If you could repeat them again, please, just for the viewers at home, because I think it's very important. People often think that what's more important is having the money, but what I'm hearing from you is there are things that play a big role in whether or not you would be able to successfully bid for a property, other than having the money in your account or having someone that's gonna, well, it's important to have a backing, financial backing. But if we can start again for low value properties before we move to the high value properties, that you need
your concept in terms of design,
concept.
aligned to the zoning development program, and your professional team.
Yes. Is that number 2?
Number 3.
Number 3 is the professional team.
Number
1 is concept. Number 2 is
development program.
Development, okay. And then number 3 is you have a proper professional team, qualified
professional
people.
Team,
Do they have to have certain experience?
Yes, they have to be registered.
Okay.
Your engineers have to be registered with AXA.
Yes. Town planners, sec plan.
It's the way we structured that thing is those are the requirements that the bank would want, by the way.
It's not just you didn't just come up with them.
We didn't just come up with them. They would want those professionals.
Okay.
As well. Your architect, your electrical engineer, your project managers.
Counter land surveyor, please don't hurt my feelings.
And then you have your transformation and empowerment, and that's how many jobs you're going to create.
Okay.
Your subcontracting and all of those things that we then need on that. The difference with the high value is the same, except you then have an added layer specifically relating to development experience.
Oh, okay. So if you now go beyond 10 million, you would need to have experience. And you also said that usually it's like 60-40, so you need to have a certain percentage, skin in the game, so to speak. Your development
experience is linked to your capacity to deliver. I mean, for instance, with the hotels, we wanted to keep them as hotels. That was clear. Hilton had closed. So we did not have a 4 or 5 star hotel in the CBD. That we then put as a requirement to say we would only accept proposals that are proposing a 4 or 5 star hotel. We were criticized for it, but the Golden Mile and the integrity of the Golden Mile is reliant on having a 4 or 5 star hotel. Then the third part, or the element linked to the 4 and 5, we then said we want an internationally recognized hotel, because Hilton had closed. I'm going to go back
closed?
to, it's operational.
Okay.
I'm emphasizing that because we are a tourist city with an ICC that will host international events. And somebody who is somewhere around the world, when they book, they would book with a group that they can recognize. And that's why your internationally recognized hotel operators become important. We want to attract, and we do attract, international tourists into the city. Where do they book? So we are criticized for that, to say we're creating
barriers.
But it was not creating barriers. It was because
realistically
we needed to be realistic about ensuring that we get an internationally recognized hotel operator, and we keep the standard in terms of hotel gradings that it must be a 4 or 5 star, because we need that as a city. Even like I said, the integrity of the Golden Mile, if you do not have a 4 or 5 star hotel, then you are not going to be able to attract almost all the LSMs. You do have 3 star hotels. They have a specific market, that those are people that are on a budget, travelers, but your 4 and 5 star hotel is a bit more premium, and those people do visit the city.
And the Golden Mile looks beautiful, by the way. Like I occasionally will go to Umhlanga, but it's beautiful, the buildings along the beach in Umhlanga and everything, and very expensive. But the city, like here, Durban, oh my goodness, it's open, it's wide, it's from Suncoast to Ushaka,
Yeah.
the walk or the run there, amazing. And when you run at night and all those hotels are lit and it looks beautiful. And it was nice seeing it back then when it was closed. Like you couldn't fully appreciate,
Yeah.
you know, the beauty of that part of the city. But now I tell you, it looks amazing. If just come to Durban.
Yeah, look, by design, and I'll even give you some stats in terms of what it has done. The city spent about 380 million in 2018 to upgrade the promenade
Yes.
and connect it to Point and Ushaka.
And Ushaka, yes.
The footfall was about 719,000 people a month. In 2024, last year, the average footfall was about 1.4 million. It's the second biggest after Gateway in terms of footfall, and it's just an open.
Yeah. There's nothing.
Now, in property development, investment follow demand.
Okay.
We've created the demand because there's a footfall.
Yes.
And that's why you're then seeing those redevelopments to try and respond to that demand. If you look at the runners, you know, in the morning, do they have an offering on the promenade? People who, even in the afternoon, on weekends. So that demand then gives rise to a demand for investment,
Yes.
to try and respond to that. And so I'm not sure whether when I was not here when the concept to extend was developed.
To extend what
The promenade.
yeah.
And whether the intention was, I think it was unintentional, my own observation. But it has given us the foot count that now demands retail to service it.
Yeah.
Because people go on the promenade. If they are
Yes.
running in the morning, they would want their...
Sometimes you just go there to sit and just watch.
Exactly.
You don't even have to be running, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Now that then gives, like I said, investment follows demand.
Yes.
It's a basic principle in property that you don't develop for the sake of developing. You develop to
Because
respond to a demand.
I want to ask something that is not eThekwini related. We promoted eThekwini enough for today. But like, how does, I'll say a guy from Taung, that's your village.
Yeah.
Where did I get that? I Googled you. How does a guy from Taung then get into being a property valuer? Anyways, let me get back to you. This is the Property Podcast. My name is Rose Ginya. Here we talk about property laws, property rights, and property investment, turning you into a property guru, one episode at a time. Today, turning you into a property guru, Mr. Thapelo Mmusinyane, Head of Real Estate at eThekwini Municipality, and Mail and Guardian's top 200 young professionals. I couldn't say that. I was going to say that because he was going to reprimand me for it. I was still asking that question then. How does it get to a point where you are like, I'm going to study property valuation? Because I asked that question. I'm a land surveyor. I struggle to find property valuers. Like if I come across a client who needs a property valuer, I struggle. I thought land surveyors are few and far in between. But I feel like property valuers are even worse. So coming from a village, how do you get then to a point where you say, you know what, I'm going to do property studies or real estate studies. How did that come about?
It was a very big accident.
A nice accident, I think.
I initially did not have an idea of what I wanted to study when I was in matric.
Okay.
Because I did my high school in Gauteng and I came from a village school.
Yes.
So I think I struggled.
Nestle jwang sekgowa so how fitla toropong.
Not that good. No, not that good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason I struggled in grade 10.
Okay.
And then had to change subjects. So
what were you doing in grade 10?
I started with maths and then I ran away because I got 8% for the 10. but I think it was just the language barrier.
Yeah.
I mean, when you grow from being taught maths in
Setswana.
in English, but they could explain it in your language so that you
Yes,
can understand
yeah.
what that. I didn't have that. So I struggled, and then I had a cocktail of not so great
Results.
subjects.
What
there-
were those subjects, if you
I mean,
still
I did
remember?
history, I did geography.
Oh.
I did business economics.
What? Okay.
I mean, I was a top 2 history student.
Hans can talk about 1913. He knows it. 1913.
No, I
Natives
was at top of the class on,
Okay.
on the history.
With the history.
And
okay.
of course the languages. Now, I wanted to study drama.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, no, I wanted to study drama.
Okay.
And then like, we don't want to pay for that.
Oh, you wanted to study drama?
Yeah. I wanted to study drama.
Why?
But drama is just for writing.
It's not because it's bad, but like,
No, just for writing.
okay.
I could write a whole lot of things.
Yes.
Even now, I could probably still write.
Do you think the property podcast should have a segment that's going to be for writing articles and then you can write for it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
could do that. But well,
He's making a promise. We'll make him sign before he leaves.
and the articles is primarily because of that writing. And then I think I fell in love with writing when I was doing our history class. We were not writing exams the traditional way of you were asked a question and then
Yes.
you answer.
Yes.
You had to write an essay.
Okay,
So I quite enjoyed
that part.
that part because you were presenting in written format. Right? So then there was some informal acting then, and I thought I was good at it.
Maybe you were, but like we're not there.
Yeah. And then, then I applied maliciously to go to tertiary, and then I applied to study marketing. I wrote an aptitude test, and then they said they were full.
Oh, okay.
I should consider studying real estate, and my question was like, who said I want to sell houses?
Have you ever sold houses, by the way?
No.
Okay.
So it wasn't until my brother saw the letter.
That's
because-
offering you.
Yes.
Okay.
I went on December holidays
Yes.
after matric, and he came to Gauteng. I went to Northwest.
Okay.
And then he saw the letter, and then when I came back, he had left, but he had written me a letter to say, look, I saw this. I think it's...
Oh, you couldn't
good-
call. It was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, we didn't have cell
phones.
So I think this is we tried, and I'm like, no, it's fine. I'll go there for a year and then I'll change a course.
Yeah.
I was staying with my uncle at the time. I was going through a divorce, and it wasn't, I think, probably until June when I met a valuer, because there are some guys that had bought a house and he was valuing it for a bank.
So where is this now? At home?
No, in Gauteng.
In Gauteng,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, like where you were staying, around where you were staying.
Yeah, in Roadport.
Okay.
So when the valuer came to value the house for bond purposes, so I then like, okay, by the way, I'm studying this thing and I'm
Not sure.
not sure what's
Yeah.
this about. I'm like, no, it's a good thing. I mean, I'm studying. Have you completed? I said, no. I only have 6 subjects. Like, but you are working and you have a car? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's
So it was a
something
lie.
here. so that's how I got stuck
Into-
with real estate. I'm like, okay, let me just,
Do it.
do it and finish it.
But then when they introduced the 1913 Act, the Natives Land Act, were you not like, oh, this is the history I studied, this is home?
I knew, I just at the time did not reconcile it in terms of what it meant in property terms and what I do.
Yes.
Because I mean, my first job was at Public Works and I was doing acquisitions and disposals. So I acquired nothing but disposals. And that's when you then get introduced to your farm portions. How they lead into a township,
Yes.
township formalization, registration of servitudes. You then, there's a process called vesting,
Yes.
where you then knew, or I got to know that, then that's when then the 1913 Act came in, because you then had the South African Development Trust that was buying land for black townships. Now we then had to vest that in the name of the state. You then had the 1993 interim constitution that then separated provincial and national government. And you then had to vest what is education. It was education and what? That would then vest with the province. And your national competitors like your police stations, your magistrate courts will then vest with national. So it became curious in terms of, okay, why was this like that? And I'm like, okay, no, I remember the history lesson
the
history
now.
lessons
and
now.
The essays I wrote.
And the essays I wrote and all of that. So it sort of gave me an idea. But in terms of how you address it, at the time I couldn't comprehend. No, I had no idea. I was just doing
what needed. And what does the class look like? You're in class now. What year is it? If you're okay with that?
I would reveal my age now, but
we know because
it was from 2002 to 2004.
Okay, and what does the class look like? Is there a lot of black students in this real estate class? Is it predominantly white? Is it
all black?
All black. Okay,
all black.
So people, how many students in class?
Maybe 30. We were not so many of us. I mean,
even but that is a significant number.
Yeah,
because I studied land surveying 2011, and there wasn't 30 of us in class.
Yeah. Well, when we graduated, I think there was maybe 10 or 15 of us. But
of course,
we and one of the funny things is that we attended classes at 4 and 5. So you know the popular courses, we were looked at like, what are you doing here?
Yes.
You are wasting time. I mean, what causes that?
Have you come across them now to remind them?
Not really. But yeah, no. So it was those jabs that will sort of make you think twice about if you're really doing something that is
worth doing.
Like, I mean, why are you going to school to sell houses? You don't need to go to school to be an estate agent. Okay.
But estate agents, even if estate agents, don't they need to, outside the qualification that they, with PPRA, do they not need to have a qualification before that? Can you go from matric and then do the PPRA?
Yeah, it's certificates. NQF 4 and 5. 5 being it ineligible to be a principal. But it's not as intense as a real estate
degree, diploma, and yeah. Okay. And so you finish school, and then when you finally finish your studies now at Vets-Tech.
Graduated in April, got employed.
Same
year. Then I got my first ever job on my first ever interview.
Did you buy a car first?
No. I bought a car 5 years later. Look, I come from a very poor background.
Yeah.
I grew up in a two-room house with a single mother who was a hotel cleaner. So obviously that you have to start from home. So I bought the car 5 years later, I think in 2010.
No sarati dilo, ne?
No. But my career progression, I moved from being the most junior official in the unit in January to being the acting head in July.
Okay, explain that. Explain that. Where is this now? Public Works. And how does it work? And why does it get to that? What is it that you did that gets you to have that speed?
I was stagnant from 2005 until 2007.
Oh.
And then I got an offer
in
in Mpumalanga, and
Public Works.
Yeah. And then they countered, like, no, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then that was, I think, in March. Then my boss resigned. Then I applied for the position. I got it in May to be an assistant director. And in July, I think the head of the property management unit in the region was suspended. Then I was appointed to act. But yeah, no.
And then from then it was just like...
Yeah, no, it was, I think when I was 23 at the time.
Wow.
But at least I could think, have ideas about how I want to do things. And I think that's when the disparity in property ownerships and all of that sort of kicked in terms of we're leasing all of this land, but how many of the people we are leasing land from are historically disadvantaged? You advertise properties in very remote towns, and there are people who actually have the monopoly because they own properties. And one of the things I argued for and was like, there are specific areas here where you don't have available buildings.
Yes.
Why are we not using that to try and bring new players in? So the property transformation part of it sort of started to kick in.
Yes.
At the time, I didn't even know there was Section 25(5). I was just...
From observation, because you don't need law
Yeah.
to see what is maybe just or practical even.
Yeah.
And so that it was just that kicking in.
So I was left abruptly because of politics.
Or from public works now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was...
But politics should have been your forte. You're a history student.
No. So that's, I think that's when I was 23, and I think for me, I always look at that episode. It's what I learned in that period that taught me a whole lot of things. Young, you are very aggressive, you power hungry and all of that.
Yeah.
And the lesson I learned from that period was how not to manage people.
Okay.
I knew then, and I was 20. I knew then. I'm like, okay, I'll never do this again.
So you had a management position, a position where you were managing people,
Yeah.
and from how you managed them, you learned how never to do it again.
Yeah.
Or was it how you were managed that you learned from that I never want to manage people how I'm managed? Was it how you managed people or how you were managed?
I was managed properly.
Okay.
Well, maybe for one, but my bosses were okay.
Yes.
Were good.
Yeah.
But you know, when you get into those positions, at a very young age, you're still a bit immature. And now everybody who reports to you is older than you.
Yes.
So when they differ with you, you tend to think because of emotional maturity that they are defying.
Until sometimes,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's so because you are not really equipped to deal with that. I mean, I had a boss who would give me a warning letter during the day, and then 5 o'clock he'll call me, hey, where are you? Let's go drinking. How? I mean, you just gave me a warning letter.
It wasn't personal.
Relax now, man. I'll withdraw it tomorrow. Just relax now and stop misbehaving.
What is it that you were doing?
So that's what I'm saying. I think that taught me a lot about management.
Yes.
How to manage people and how not to
manage people. Yeah.
Because I had a boss who was, like I said, the guy who appointed me was, and is still my mentor even till today.
Yeah.
Who managed me like that, but I wasn't managing like that.
Like that.
So I learned that you sort of have to be a little bit more dynamic. But I only learned that when he had left, and they had brought another one who
wasn't like him.
It wasn't like him.
Yeah.
And
we hope he's not watching.
No, we're fine now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course they have to be fine. It's all in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. But so eThekwini now, back to eThekwini. Because you are eThekwini kind of. When you think real estate eThekwini, we think you. So you are in eThekwini and you've now fixed the issues of leases in Elangeni, not Elangeni, let's just say the Promenade or Golden Mile, or whatever we call it. But what's next now for eThekwini?
Look, we have 1,084 leases. 75% of them were signed between 1960 and 2004.
So is that in the CBD or just all around
across the
eThekwini?
city.
Okay.
Across the city. Now, what do you think the demographic profile would be?
I don't know.
I've given you one precinct. It's an example. I said 75% of them, 750 of them were signed between 19. In fact, the oldest list was signed in 1889
Yes.
and 2004. What we then did with the land release strategy was, well, we introduced a strategy in 2021, was for us to be a little bit more proactive.
Okay.
Let's try and renew leases that are coming up in time. And that's why we did the hotel 2 years before it
Okay.
expired.
It expired, yeah.
But also we own almost 9% of the properties within eThekwini. eThekwini has,
Almost 9%.
yeah,
Okay.
eThekwini has 572,000 properties.
Yes.
With the
Oh,
capital,
572,000.
yeah, with the capital value of 795 billion. Now I look after the role as well, so I have
You look after?
the valuation part of it.
Yes.
So it's that,
The valuation role. Yes.
the valuation role, and the property management. Now out of that 572, we own 53,384. Now these two things are interrelated.
Yeah.
If you look at it, I did see some of the snippets of your podcast where you're talking about the rates. If you look at it, your biggest municipalities,
Which is Cape Town?
Joburg is the biggest in terms of number of properties. They have 930,000 properties
Yes.
with a value of 1.5 trillion. Cape Town has 908,000 properties with a capital value of 1.7 trillion. You then have eThekwini and Tshwane at about 700,000 properties, at about 700 million in value. You then have eThekwini at 572,
So we are small.
extremely small. In terms of formalized
Yes.
properties,
Yes.
doesn't mean the size.
Yeah, not the land size now.
Yeah. Then the reason for that is because eThekwini is 68% rural
Rural,
and
yes.
32% formal.
And I think that's actually cool, but continue. It is
I have a
great-
different view.
Okay.
Now, when you look at our tariffs on the rates, would not be the same, because the similarity we have with Joburg and Cape Town is that our budgets are 70 billion plus in terms of what you need to fulfill a constitutional mandate as a. Now they have a larger pool. In fact,
yeah,
Cape Town alone
yes.
has 884,000 residential properties. eThekwini has 490,000.
Residential.
Yeah, it's almost half.
Yeah.
So they have a very large pool. Now, if we were to charge, all of us were to charge 1 cent, we'll always get less.
Yes.
But the budget are the same. Now,
Okay.
when you then look at the tariffs in terms of what eThekwini charges and what Cape Town charges,
Yes.
or even Joburg charges, they are gonna be different
Because that's what we've been complaining about.
yes, and I think that debate at times is misinformed, because there's two things that makes your rate and taxes. It's the size of the properties
Yes.
and the value of the
Of the
properties.
property, yeah.
Now, I said we are at 795.
Yes.
Cape Town is at 1.7 trillion.
Yeah.
Joburg is at 1.5 trillion.
Trillion,
We are
yeah.
not even at a trillion. And the property portfolio, or the number of properties, it's small. It's between 30 and 40% less than what those two metros have. Now, the only way you can then, you then need to look at additional sources of revenue. And by the way, I don't deem rate and taxes as an income. It's a tax. That's why it's called rate and taxes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
You pay rate and taxes by virtue of you being a property owner.
Yes, we don't like to do it.
But you pay it
Yes, we
because
pay
of
it.
that. Now,
Yeah.
income is lease. What you get from your rental income, that's an
That
income.
is an income.
So when you then look at those budgets, almost 50 billion or so is committed because that's your bulk purchases. When you buy water from Mgeni, when you buy electricity from Eskom. So for you to be able to then subsidize a ratepayer in terms of the rates, is you then have to create sources of revenue. And a property portfolio, 53,000 properties, we don't need all of them. It's also linked to the decision not to sell. It's a secondary reason that our IDP indicator is financial sustainability. You don't achieve financial sustainability when you sell because you get money once a year.
And it's done.
But when you are leasing, you get money for 50 years.
While we are on that leasing, how much were these properties leasing before these leases were renewed? How much was the rental amount?
I'm not going to be specific, but generically, what we were getting from the properties on the promenade,
yes,
was about 6 million, which gave us an ROI of 1%.
And then once the leases were renewed,
56 million.
From 6 million,
yeah,
to 56 million.
56 million.
And which means it was still worth it in terms of the business. That's why some of the people that were leasing before, some of the businesses are still leasing now. Or has it completely changed?
It has changed. I mean, if we're moving from 6 million to 56, you've added an extra 50 million.
Yes. No, it has changed in terms of the revenue that's coming to eThekwini.
Yes.
But in terms of the the
rate.
people that are leasing, the tenants, is it more or less still the same?
It's not the same.
People, or it's completely...
Well, the hotels is still the same people, but I think the lease terms and conditions are different from what they were.
But so what I was getting at is, if the same, let's say, hotel group is still using that same property, which means it's still worth it, even if they are paying, in total combined, they're paying 50 million more.
Yeah.
So at that time, the municipality was under collecting the income that it should have been.
It's not necessarily under collecting. Bear in mind what was leased in 1965 was land.
Oh, there were no buildings.
Yes. It was land. Now, when the lease expires, we take it back with the improvement.
Well,
so the value would be higher because we are getting land with improvement.
I think the lesson to someone who is not into big property development, just small house, if you get into a lease and you're leasing a piece of land and you build your house on the piece of land, when the owner of the land takes back their land, the house goes with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you look at it, if half a percentage on rates increases is about 300 million. Whether you are going up or down, adjusting up or down. Now, if we make 1 billion from the property portfolio, we've subsidized you as a ratepayer by 1.5%, just making 1 billion from.
So we should have celebrated as ratepayers.
You should, because if we make more money on the rates, it's going to result in you paying your rates tariff coming lower because we are able to supplement that income from elsewhere. Because even with these properties, they are not only paying rent, they are paying rent and we are rating them. So you get the rate and taxes as a tax, but you are also then
also
getting
paying the rental amount.
The rental amount. So you're getting two incomes from one property, whereas currently with your property, we are only getting, well, I'm not going to say, I'm saying it's a tax.
Yes.
We are only getting the
being
tax.
taxed. I'm not paying rent.
We are
Well,
not
it's
paying.
my property. I bought it. I didn't opt to lease it.
Yeah. So the financial sustainability part of it then comes in there to say, when we then list these properties, we get that income in perpetuity. We always going to get that income. So when these leases then come, that income then grows. So the strategy is to try and make as much money as we possibly can on the property portfolio, because we don't need 53,000 properties for basic municipal service.
Yeah.
We don't need all of them. Now,
Yes.
the ones you don't need, you then lease, you will get, and secondly, we are not rating them because they are in our name. But we rate them as soon as
someone takes them.
Someone takes them. So we rate them and then get the leasing income. So you are growing. On the other hand, your 572,000 rate base. At the same time, you are also then creating another source of income on the leasing side.
And that is what property valuation is about. It was about, partly it was about you sitting down and saying the value of these properties now is this and this is how much you could generate from it.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking from my perspective of someone sitting at home. Maybe it's a parent who has a child that they would like to get into property valuation, to be a property valuer. Hopefully they don't get there by accident, they're well informed before they get, but so that's what property valuation is about. It's about seeing land as not just as, but as an asset that should generate.
Yes, but you need to be more than a valuer for that. For me, the last time I valued anything was maybe 12, 15 years ago.
Okay.
But it helps in understanding. That's why I could relate these two things
economics.
To say. I know how value is created.
Yes.
Because I understand the elements of value.
Yeah.
What creates value?
Okay.
It's a rights development. So if you then want to create a value, get rights and develop a property.
Okay.
How you value an agricultural land is completely different to how you value a land that has a right, commercial rights. That's valuation.
Yes.
Linked to that, then development is if you then want to increase your value, you build a structure. The value then changes. But to answer your question, valuation is a rare skill. It's a rare skill. It is even listed on the
scarce
skills. There is not so many. I think in South Africa there is less than 5,000 of us. Generally, if you then go in terms of categories of being a candidate, a professional, and professional associate and a professional, it just get thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
So there is, and I mean, you from work-wise and demand-wise, they always that demand. We are growing in terms of the number of properties that are being developed.
Yeah.
When your property gets bonded, the value are values. When we rate your property, we value.
Yes. Okay.
So that demand is
always going to be there.
It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
Well, there are certain things that sort of, in my personal view, I think threaten the profession.
The profession?
Like AI. I mean, the example I always make is that you cannot get a legal opinion from AI. You need a lawyer to sign it off.
Oh, yes. Yes, you still need a lawyer to sign it.
But you can get certain internet-generated reports that are purported to be values.
Values, yeah. I'd like us to have a conversation some other time. Maybe not today because, I don't want to muddy the waters to mix things up. You talk about value, and I love rural property. Not that I love, but I come from rural areas as well. And what always bothers me is how we haven't been able to treat properties in rural areas as assets. How do I put this? I can't say I have this big house and I go to the bank, I'm like, as collateral, not asset, as collateral. I can't go to a bank and say, I have this house back at home, it's big, it's beautiful, but now I need, I don't know, 200,000, 400,000 to take my son through school. Can you give me money and then I'll pay you for it? I can't do that.
It was by design. You grew up in a village. There was a farm next to you. That farm had a title deed.
Yeah. But not, well, even, no, those villages don't have.
I'm saying you had a farm.
The farm next to the village had a title deed.
Had a title deed.
Yes.
And that enabled the owner to go to a bank and borrow against it.
Yeah.
The village does not have a title deed.
Yes.
It goes back to the legacies of the Group Areas Act. And by the way, you can still get it formalized. Go to the chief and register 99-year lease.
But you can't register, that's why it becomes complicated. You can't register that 99-year lease without it being surveyed. Once it's 10 years or more, you need to survey. That's the problem. When you start saying you want to survey, you need to now apply SPLUMA, Department of Agriculture. Then it gets complicated because it becomes too costly. If the chief allows you to do it, it becomes too costly to go through the process of applying to agriculture, to go through the process of getting the consent from the landowner because it's registered with, let's say, Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. And then you apply SPLUMA, it gets complicated.
But why, if that's the case, then how do we end up with shopping centers in rural areas are registered by them?
So then they have the capacity, the muscle, the financial muscle to go through the SPLUMA process. that an individual person who owns a piece of land, because for me as a practitioner, as a professional who is doing the application, the price, I cannot lower it such that the person who's just building a house, it becomes worth it for them.
But should it not be up to us
as a community? That's why I said this.
I almost said
you can say whatever you want. This is a safe space.
As black professionals, to try and resolve that issue. I'm interested to, when you say it's expensive, what is the actual cost?
So rural development and land reform spoke to them once when they do those land claims, and then they will need to go through the process. And they said it costs on average 80,000 to get a land subdivided. But that is now excluding if there's gonna need to be services going there. There's gonna be requirements, Spluma requirements, that are gonna say we need infrastructure. For an example, if you go to Umlazi, right, there's a bunch of houses that built on land that belongs on Ingonyama Trust. The subdivision was done under a different law other than Spluma. Subdivision's done, everything done. The sites are there, subdivision has been done, but people still can't own the land, they don't have title deeds. Why? Because it's not, it doesn't correlate with Spluma, so.
But see, I have, even with Spluma, I have my own, again, issues. Who wrote these laws?
We were there. We can't now still. It was whoever did, but we were also there. We can't still blame.
One of the things that always intrigued me about, and I'll come to the Spluma part of it and tell you my issues with it, is if you were to negotiate a property transaction with my mother, you are most likely to pay nothing because she does not know.
Okay.
Try it with me. You are most likely to pay twice. Because I know the technicalities of what. Now, when these laws were written, who wrote them?
It was lawyers.
They start with the Constitution. It was written, and I don't know if my mother knew or even made an input, let alone share the technical capabilities or the mindset to even make the input to say this is. She couldn't. You then come to Spluma in terms of that. The example I always make is that, does your grandmother know that she actually has a power to object to a rezoning?
Yes.
And the simple answer is always no.
No. Now, but it's not even the grandmother, it's Sbu being educated and young. And the point of this podcast, by the way, to get people into...
But the people that wrote it were giving themselves the power to veto what we then wanted to do. Now, how did we come to a conclusion that, and we accepted it, that for you to then survey your land in Mbumbu, you would then need to comply with Spluma and have bulk services, because we are perpetuating what has always been apartheid spatial planning. See, for me, and two, on the spatial transformation issues, I mean, I always argue, why do we not have, I'll get in trouble for this, social housing in Umklang?
Yes, but I've also argued, like, why?
Because Spluma has given the residents the power to object to that. And that's why those kind of things were built up there. But us as black professionals, I'm not sure whether we couldn't understand or we understood, but we did not know. And the argument that always gets made is that no, it's going to devalue properties.
How? Because you expect people who earn within a certain threshold to work here. How are they supposed to get to work?
That objection is meant to perpetuate that special exclusion that apartheid create. And hence they have the power to object. Because during apartheid, could we go to court, take the apartheid government to court, using the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act that they did not follow the law? We couldn't. We had no rights. Now, so we must be very careful about who write these laws, and if we don't interrogate them.
And it's coming from the head of eThekwini. He knows what he's talking about. he knows what he's talking about. That is a question.
Yeah. Now, it's
not head of eThekwini, head of eThekwini real estate.
Now, then it talks about what I started with the constitution. We have not tested those things by implementing and going to, if we then get challenged, go to court.
Yeah.
What we do on the land release strategy to deal with the imbalances in terms of ownership is we have something, Section 2 and F of the Preferential Procurement Framework Act have an objective criteria. We use that as to give effect to what Section 25.5 wants. And we've used it in terms of demographic and gender. On the beachfront, we've done it. In the last release, we had 2 properties there, the Old California Dreaming and the Joint. The objective criteria was that we would give preference to companies that are in the majority owned by females. It's within the law. Now, you can take us to court.
And then you're going to fight?
We will fight it in court, but we are trying to achieve the gender disparity using the law.
Yeah.
I don't think we have tested the limits or the interpretation or the legality about some of these things we have in our laws. I'm going back again to Spluma.
Yes.
And as government in general, I mean, you see the case, the Thapelo case that was the Constitutional Court ruled against. The implications of that case are...
please repeat the case.
The Thapelo case.
You'll have to lay it out to us.
Where I think the province had sold land.
Yes.
That housing had said they wanted for social housing.
Is that in the Western Cape?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Hey, now
the implication of that case, they confirm that special transformation is a constitutional requirement. So you cannot...
sell land that is earmarked for...
No, you must check if it cannot be used to fulfill
okay.
what are constitutional obligations. But I doubt if across the country that is then going to be followed, because what you are going to end up with because of that case is that social housing project is most likely going to happen. In where? In Sea Point. So when we read these laws, we must read them in such a way that they empower us to do certain things. And you will always get threats that we are going to take you to court. On the same, again, coming back to a land release strategy, you've had people that have lost bids and have threatened to take us to court. It's fine, let's go. Because we are, from where we're sitting, we know we follow the law to the T.
Yes.
If the court overturns, they will give an explanation in terms of that. But I don't think we've tested it to a level where we will litigate on the basis that if the obligation to provide bulk infrastructure is a government mandate, why would you then want me to?
Why shouldn't I get a title deed because the government can't provide bulk infrastructure?
And what that title deed does for you is create access to finance, which is indirectly access to wealth.
Yes.
And you can get that by just registering a 99-year lease.
Yeah.
Now, we've allowed Spluma and all of those other things. Like I said, we have not challenged the constitutionality of it to say, but some provisions here are unconstitutional in a sense that, yes, it falls within the ambit of Section 25.6 that says, make sure that people that have inferior land rights get proper rights. I'm trying to get it through a registered list, but there's an impediment that...
there's upgrading of less formal... What's this act?
Less formal townships.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that works only when it's a township. When it's a township being established. You can't, as an individual, like say, I'm going to use that same act to subdivide or to create a list for my single property. And also it works in townships. It won't work if it's a farm.
But is it not creating inequality or land inequality and perpetuating it? Like I said, your retail centers and your petrol filling stations are on registered leases.
Because they can afford to go through the process.
Yeah. then take the state to court on the basis that they are not fulfilling their constitutional
Usually
mandate.
the people that are residing in these areas do not have the knowledge or the financial arm again to take anyone to court. These are people that just get removed from their properties for mining purposes because someone wants to mine sand or someone wants to mine some rock for construction somewhere. So it's a whole other conversation.
I agree 75% and I disagree 75%. If you look at some of those houses that people have built there, some of them they have the financial capacity to do that.
True.
Perhaps maybe they don't do it because it's going to come with obligations in terms of your rates and taxes.
Yes.
Because you can rate the registered lease.
And also, are you the person that's looking to tax Adams? Are you responsible for that, or should we leave that out?
Look, the law says you must tax a registered property. All right. It's not me.
So you can't tax Adams despite the structures that you see there.
Because they are not registered.
They're not registered.
Because you need to link a property to a description and an owner.
Why do you need to link a property to a description? Okay, that is, I know that's the deeds registries and then the other acts, but should we not revise it and then we can just link it to a geographic coordinate?
And it will be consistent with the law. You rate a property owner.
Yeah, the ownership can be linked to the positioning because that's what diagrams are anyways, SG diagrams.
The confirmation of ownership in terms of this Registries Act is either you have a right over the property, which is a registered lease, or a title deed that decides you as the owner of the property.
But we can create a lease based on the position. We know there's a position. We verified there's a position. Yeah. I'm saying you were saying we can challenge the spluma. I'm saying we can challenge the process altogether.
Yeah. If the only way to formalize those properties is through registered leases. For me, I think in fact, you may argue that 80,000 is a lot of money. I think it's a cheaper option than to proclaim a township, because not everybody may want to have a recognizable legal right.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please remember to subscribe, share this video, and comment down below. And ask any questions that you may like Mr. Mmusinyane here to answer. I'm not answering any questions. I have limited information. That's why I invite gurus to turn you into a guru.